As humans, our innate connection and draw to the ocean reminds us that this is where it all began. The proof is in our veins, which flow with salt water, and in our chests, which rise and fall like the tide. It's no wonder we are called to the water. Even if we stop at the edge or just dip in a toe, the ocean unites us all through the air we breathe, food we eat, and curiosity she piques. Occasionally, we are lucky enough to witness the ocean's secrets at low tide, when she pulls back the liquid curtain to reveal a mysterious sort of life, one that challenges the human imagination, blurring lines between familiar and unknown. In each balled-up rack of kelp, there is a story. Where that kelp grew, which cove it came from. How did you get here? For millennia, these drifting racks of kelp have been symbols that somewhere, a forest is alive. And even in its death, kelp seems to signify new life. Through kelp, we are connected. The coast of Northern California is rugged and often inaccessible. Yet, despite its hard edges, this place is a haven of life. Robust and biodiverse ecosystems erupt from every crack in the seafloor, and creatures big and small fill the intertidal. But beneath the surface, a drama is unfolding, of which the outcome balances on a knife edge. Before we can understand what is happening, we must first answer the human call to dive into the sea.
I think for me personally, the feeling of swimming through an underwater forest is of pure bliss. Like it's heaven. It's heaven on earth. And it's like walking through the redwoods and hearing nothing but yourself and the bubbles.
Seeing the light rays dancing through the kelp canopy, watching the fish sway with the slight surge, and seeing the light dance on the sand while you fly into the sanctum and get to just worship in the kelp cathedral. That was my first time that I felt truly transcendental on the planet. I felt connected to the bigger thing. I felt small and big all at the same time.
And on those nice days, I mean, you got 25, 30 feet of viz, and it's just absolutely beautiful. To me, even more than like in Mexico and other places where there's like world-class diving.
A bull kelp forest has an ethereal quality to it that's difficult to describe compared to a giant kelp forest, where the giant kelp will form massive columns, pillars to this edifice, to this forest that you're going in, reaches from sea floor to sea ceiling. It feels like you're in this atrium, this sanctum. A bull kelp forest is very different because there's kelps reaching the surface and then kelps every step of the way underneath, reaching down to the bottom. And it almost feels at times from the head and the flowing hair that you're surrounded by other humans.
It's incredible. I think that I've seen more biodiversity, more different types of life in kelp forests along the Northern California coastline than I've seen anywhere else in the world.
It's an ecosystem that is really productive, and there's so many animals that live in the kelp forest.
Once you get under that top layer, it's just the thin stipes, rope-like stipes going down, and then you'll start going through maybe some schools of blues or blacks.
In the water column itself, you'll see a lot of salps and different types of jellyfish.
You pass these kelp crabs that reach out and try and grab you when you go by, and then you get to the bottom and it's its own environment.
Because there's such a high diversity of different types of algae. You're going to see greens and browns and reds.
Turkish towel, they call them, maybe cow's tongue, you may know it by a different name. Acid weed, Desmorestia flowing by, maybe some laminarials with woody stipes mixed in there. It's alive with character. And in all of this are little fishes and shrimps.
You'll see lots of abalone and urchins and different types of invertebrates and really amazing fish.
There's sponges, there's tunicates, there's bryozoans. The rocks are pink, they're covered in coralline algae, erect and crustose. There's colorful starfish, from bat stars to leather stars crawling about, anemones galore.
You've got your beautiful sea anemones. We've got a bunch of nudibranchs up here. Palm kelp and algae would be all over the tops of the reefs.
Down to the huge lingcod that are sitting at the base and looking up, wondering where their next rockfish meal is going to come from.
And then you've just got your monster holdfasts of all the bull kelp going with the stipes going to the top.
Kelp is found on 1/3 of the world's coastlines. Their biodiversity supports local and transient species, making kelp forests a significant component in the global ocean food chain and carbon cycle. Just like terrestrial forests, kelp forests are primary producers which uptake carbon to grow and produce oxygen. Kelp forests provide food for people around the world, supporting a multi-million-dollar fishing industry. Kelp unites communities and represents a significant pillar of culture, demonstrating that their value is inherently more than economical. In California, kelp canopies sometimes span for many miles during their prolific season, specifically bull kelp, which dominates the coastal ecosystem of Northern California. Bull kelp is an annual species which regularly appears in the spring and dies in the fall. Life in this region depends on the ability for bull kelp to establish every spring, only after the winter swells or other oceanographic changes cause them to die.
So the perfect storm of events really began in 2013 when there was this mysterious disease that came through the Eastern Pacific known as the sea star wasting disease that basically swept through and eliminated almost all the sea stars that we have here in subtidal waters. And so after we saw sea star wasting, that's what really alarmed researchers. It had happened in these waters and waters in general before, but not at this scale. Right after that hit, we also had warm water events. So specifically, we had a warm blob event where you had this big blob of warm water actually sit on our coastline, followed by a severe El Nino event, which occupied our waters from 2015, 2016-ish. And that warm blob is still persisting that whole time up until about January of 2019. It was, to my understanding, last detected by NOAA satellites. And what that means for kelp forests is that when you increase the temperature in the water, it makes makes it really hard for organisms that use a temperature cue or a nutrient cue to send and start growing. So that inhibited kelp from growing. Right after the sea star wasting disease, we saw this massive recruitment of urchins. So adult-sized urchin physically mowing through the kelp forest ecosystems. It wasn't necessarily this pulse recruitment. It was adults moving in from somewhere else into shallower waters. And we saw that happening at different rates, different speeds, different locations throughout California, and we have for a number of years. And so all of that, like warming of the oceans, loss of biological predators, not only the sea star, but mind you also that in Northern California, that was the last remaining predator other than human.
Purple urchins, they are a natural part of the ecosystem, and normally they live in cracks and crevices, and in lower numbers they don't really cause a problem with the ecosystem. But recently, without a predator to control their populations, they have overpopulated. And the purple urchins eat kelp, and they will actually eat all the kelp. They'll basically turn a healthy kelp forest into what's called an urchin barren.
They're called that because the urchins have gotten so hungry that they crawl out, and if they're unstopped, they march in a front and eat everything in their way. And in that fashion, they mimic a forest fire, where in front of them is nothing but built up structures and livelihoods and communities of all these various kelp critters. And then the front moves over, it's almost like an etch-a-sketch, just wipes the slate clean.
Pre-disaster, the reefs, even if it wasn't bull kelp, they're covered with growth, they're covered with sand sponge, all these different life, organisms, green algae, red lettuce, all this. And now that the disasters happened, the purple urchins have spread out so much that they're looking for anything they can eat. Now it's like it's like concrete is what I describe the rocks. So we call it moon rock, and that's a lot of what we see now. So you go down and you see the reefs and you see the rocks. There's no green algae, there's no red algae, there's not even any like sponges on the rocks. It's just concrete looking rock. I mean, any nutrients have been pulled off of the rock itself.
It's really devastating what we're seeing. It's not like anything I've ever seen.
And they're not the enemy, they're just hungry, and they're able to survive better than the red urchins and the red abalone.
So the scale of the urchin out here are very high in density. And so I say high in density as in each of these urchin are actually like spine to spine in some locations. And so when we're talking about these urchin actually being in the system, they're not only occupying space and like eating everything in that space, but they're also inhibiting settlement of other critters in the ocean. So fish that lay eggs, they're going to eat that up. Invertebrates, they're going to eat that up too. They eat almost anything. And so they're really pervasive in that sense. Again, not only for space, but for inhibiting the growth of other organisms.
In the years before the disaster, we'd see, gopher cod, black and yellows, 2 here, 3 there, everywhere. A cabezon will swim by, a big lingcod will follow you around like a dog, and now we'll see maybe a sea trout on a dive, maybe a lingcod, 1 gopher. It's just the fish don't have that healthy protection of a kelp forest, so they've had to move and go somewhere else too.
The emotional toll that an urchin barren has when you know what the kelp forest has inside of it, it's one of reset at best and one of devastation at worst.
Yeah, my name's John Erlinson. I'm an archaeologist, retired professor of anthropology recently, and the director of the Museum of Natural and Cultural History at the University of Oregon. Essentially what I do is a kind of ancient marine biology. We call it historical ecology. We try to understand the relationship that humans have had with, in this case, coastal ecosystems over millennia. I've been lucky enough to work in kelp forests from Kodiak, Alaska, Southeast Alaska, down into Southern California. And I was talking about how humans articulated in various places I'd worked with kelp forests. And Bob was like, a light bulb went off and he said, oh my God, it was like a kelp highway. So the concept is basically that people who are adapting to kelp forests in Northeast Asia would have had no real barriers all the way around the North Pacific. And in fact, the similarity of the ecology of those kelp forests would have facilitated their movement relatively rapidly from Northeast Asia into the Americas. California kelp forests have been relatively resilient. And part of that resiliency is because they're very ancient, they're much more ancient, they are more biodiverse, and there's more kind of redundancy built into them. There are more predators that control sea urchins in California kelp forests than in Alaska. We have at least 12,000 year record along the California coast of human interaction with kelp forest ecosystems. And during those millennia, the indigenous peoples clearly had impacts. They had some effects on kelp forests and kelp forest organisms, but they never caused a serial collapse that we can tell. And when Europeans arrived, they arrived with a different mindset. It wasn't such a conservation mindset. Well, now we know that if you just keep screwing with, messing up kelp forest ecosystems in California, you can make them collapse. And what's happening in Northern California in the last decade is unprecedented in the last 15,000 years along the California coast.
I was definitely like a shop kid. I kind of grew up surfing, diving.
Here's me at Van Dam back in the day.
Blake Tallman, born and raised in Fort Bragg. Yeah, my dad opened the dive shop up in 1977. After he got out of the Navy, he was a deep sea diver. He moved up here, did commercial diving in the early 70s, and then made enough money to open up the shop. And commercial urchin divers were kind of his main customers for a while, because that was a big thing in the 80s especially. And then abalone divers pretty much were our big percentage of our business all through then. And then he passed away in 2006, and I took over. I was 20 years old. It used to be like a nuisance. You have to swim out through it if you're going ab diving or spearfishing or whatever. It was kind of in the way, and just stalks everywhere. When you're underwater, you'd want to dive under it. It was easier to go dive under it than try to swim on the surface and kind of get through all the tops of the bull kelp. Most of the places that I grew up diving at, that I've been at again now, it's like a moonscape, kind of. It's like purple urchins everywhere, maybe an ab here or there. Where there is some kelp going on, the abs are there, and they're still abs, but most places I've been to is just night and day. is probably 2016, 2017, and I did this dive, and it was from Caspar, and I went out of Caspar and I swam down the coast to Jug Handle, and it's kind of an area I'd been to before. And there's always good abs there and fish, and I did that whole swim. It's probably, I don't know, half a mile or so, and there was like, I think I saw one abalone, no kelp, the urchins were awful. And at that time, working at the dive shop, you know, there's still places that you can go and find abalone, so it's kind of like Fish and Game was like reducing the abalone limits and all that. But people still saw plenty of abs in other places, so it's kind of like, oh, this is a bunch of BS, or, you know, they didn't really agree with what was going on. But when I did that swim, I just, having been there before and seeing like literally thousands of abalone, and then just seeing like one, you know, skimpy little ab was total, like, you know, big realization.
After the closure of commercial abalone diving in the late 90s, a free dive only recreational abalone harvest was established in the waters north of San Francisco. The prolific numbers of red abalone on California's north coast allowed over 35,000 recreational divers to sustainably harvest an average of 224,000 to 258,000 red abalone each year. The red abalone fishery brought an estimated $44 million annually to the North Coast economy. Due to severe kelp loss starting in 2014, populations of abalone began to starve. Due to the scientific uncertainty as to the future of Northern California red abalone populations, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife put an indefinite closure on the recreational red abalone fishery starting in 2018. As of 2025, there are no immediate plans to reopen the fishery.
Not much diving culture going on now, really, you know. A lot of people came here for abalone because it's such kind of a rare thing to get, and there's plenty of them. It's affected the community huge. I mean, for me, being owner of the dive shop and growing up there, and just every year having just a ton of people coming to town, everybody going camping at the campgrounds. All these families had their traditions. They came back every year. After that, after they closed it and after the kelp was gone, it was just, for the dive shop, was obviously directly affected. I mean, we couldn't sustain a business anymore, but also for the community. I mean, all the hotels and restaurants and shops from all the families coming into town and supporting the community is huge. Yeah, a huge difference.
Yeah, the community's been hurt bad by this abalone closure.
Our only dive shop closed after all these years, and a lot of their income was tourists and ab season and all that.
And locals.
But the locals, we bought everything there.
For me, what's hurt me bad, my family, is the lack of kelp to provide a really good quality edible urchin, or the red urchin.
I'm Grant Downey. I'm a commercial sea urchin diver here on the North Coast.
Yeah, I'm Pat Downey, Grant's dad. I came up from Southern California in 1987. Been here about half my life, so it's been a good opportunity being a sea urchin fisherman on the North Coast. It was a gold rush. Things have changed now, but it's still an occupation.
It's a lifestyle more than a job, and the area up here really supports that. If I wanted to get in the water, it was always with my family. It was always with my dad. You know, that's been a special thing my whole life.
It's been a while since I've been able to work in a really healthy kelp forest. It's actually really hard to work in the kelp. I mean, you can get really tangled up in it.
We'd be in such thick kelp that the only way you could weave through with your hose and then get back to the boat is you had to, you know, lop off some kelp stipes here and there just to make it.
You could just leave the jetty, drive out, every single rock would be covered with kelp from there to the beach. It would be hard to even drive to some of these inlets that you wanted to work. Now when we go out, it's very hard for us to even find a place to work because there's no kelp. Up here, the purpuratus literally have just devastated all the ecosystems that I'm used to seeing.
In this whole scenario of disaster and kelp loss, the urchins are really villainized, but you need to bring it down to species specific. The red urchins, we've seen a little bit of a die-off and loss of population of the red urchins. It's the purple sea urchins, even though they're a native species, that are the ones that are villainized as the issue with the kelp not growing back. And it's not that they're doing it on purpose, it's just they're hungry. There's nothing out there to eat. There's 100 times too many of them, and they're spread out looking for whatever there is. And that's displacing the habitat of the red sea urchins that I typically harvest for food.
There might be reds there, but we can crack one and break them open and look at them. A lot of them are empty. There's nothing in them.
We do commercially harvest the purple sea urchins. The average person I see on the street, we talk about the issue and they say, wow, well, your job should be great. You should be out there harvesting all these urchins all the time. And that's where I have to tell them that it's not of a commercially harvestable size, and they're completely malnourished. It's an empty shell, and that's why it's not something that will be consumed or harvested. There's 30 urchin divers that are out of work, right? There's just at our plant alone, Ocean Fresh Seafoods, Bob employed 120 to 150 employees that processed all our sea urchins. So we would be able to work 3 or 4 days, and there were so many divers, and then we would have to take a couple days off because we had harvested so many urchins that this crew of 150 people couldn't keep up with us. So when the disaster hit, they all lost their jobs too. It's like, well, the reason I have what I have is because of sea urchins. And without the kelp, it's hurting me. It's hurting my industry. So
I feel I've almost cursed him by letting him become a sea urchin fisherman. I'm not sure if it was the right thing to do. Yeah, I enjoy working with my family, my son. It's been really good, but at the same time, when you have a bad year, it's really hard. You don't know when you're going to work. You don't know what you're going to make.
There's still a lot of people that don't know what's going on. So they look out and they see the ocean every day, and they've noticed that there's not kelp. If you want to know what's going on, you can easily figure it out, but it's not billboards and huge signs like bring this back. Like, that's what it should be.
My name's Tristan Anush McHugh, and I'm the Kelp Project Director with the Nature Conservancy. The first time I went diving in kelp forests, I instantly fell in love with it. I had dove coral systems before, I had dove relatively warm places, but there's something just so magical about that three-dimensional structure that I was hooked, like right when I got in. I grew up diving Monterey Bay. I did my master's work down in San Diego and the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. I've dove Oregon, I've dove Washington, and so I have a pretty firm understanding of what a kelp forest is and how that varies by geographic location as well. The loss of kelp in Northern California had an incredibly profound and strong impact on the community, not only economically, but functionally, emotionally. It's depressing. It's sad. I've received tons of messages from folks that were just like, hey, I'm really happy you're monitoring this, but we're really sad about your results. And I am too, right? Like this is something that has a very foundation in our very existence. The community was the first group of folks to kind of whistleblow and realize this loss. Many locals have tuned into what is happening around them, and they've become really involved in this whole effort. And they're the ones who are actually motivating that we get out to these sites, that we go keep telling them what we're seeing. We do public meetings, we do all sorts of fun stuff to just keep everyone educated on the issue. And, of course, over the years, things have shifted, things have changed, but really the community is still at the heart and soul of why we are really trying to understand these things, because we've seen such loss. With the loss of kelp came the loss of human dynamics and just community structure. You have people that are saying, like, what can you quite possibly do at all to make this happen. And I think there's a grain of truth in that, right? It's a very daunting task.
There really are a lot of really strong connections in North Coast communities, especially with fishermen who have engaged in the recreational red abalone fishery and the commercial red sea urchin fishery, both of which have collapsed in the last several years, as well as cultural connections, especially with North Coast tribes. And North Coast communities in general have also pretty extensively noticed this loss because these kelp forests are right in their backyard. So the disappearance is a pretty significant loss. My name's Rietta Holman, and I manage the Kelp Recovery Project, the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, in partnership with the Greater Farallones Association. And we focus on kelp restoration and management strategies for the North Coast of California. I saw these kelp forests go from healthy, vibrant, biodiverse kelp forests to urchin barrens, all within a very short period of time. From 2014 to 2018, we really didn't see any momentum at all. And so once we initiated the Kelp Recovery Working Group, that was the first time I really saw some momentum in a positive direction. And so since then, we really have focused on how we can best build momentum and implement practical strategies for kelp restoration and monitoring and research. And so the publication of our Sonoma-Mendocino Bull Kelp Recovery Plan, I think, was a huge step in the right direction. If we can get these projects moving on the sooner end, then all the better for adaptive management moving forward. We should not be sitting around and twiddling our thumbs while an entire region of 200 miles of the coastline experiences extensive kelp forest ecosystem loss.
Honestly, the field of kelp restoration for me and for many, I think, has changed drastically in the last few years just because of how much more we've learned and how much more we've realized that we don't know. And I think that's the exciting part and also the very daunting part about what we're doing right now. What we do know is that in some systems that have lost kelp, spores are unavailable, right? And so that could be inhibiting kelp recovery, but we're not certain, right? So I think the moment we're at is trying to understand what are those things that are actually inhibiting kelp from growing. So what we're doing is doing a series of experiments to understand a bit more about what is actually happening in the system and what we as humans can potentially do to mitigate any more losses. So grazer suppression can take a few different forms, but really what it comes down to is if there's an overabundance of an organism that's inhibiting the kelp from flourishing in very targeted places, what can we possibly do to lessen that herbivory in that system?
2018, we started our removals.
We do it by hand. People do it all different methods. We just choose to do it by hand because there's very, if not zero bycatch. We see some areas where they're the size of a lentil, a sea urchin. They're tiny, millions and billions of them in an area where it's all black, but they're tiny. So to eradicate those, it's going to be a tough job. When we do the project where we're removing the urchins, we're trying to get rid of all of them or bring a density down. You have to be careful about not leaving those little guys. You got to take them all, and that's going to be a really tough effort.
You're a wave, baby. I'm a ripple compared to you. You're a wave, baby. When you're overhead. You're a wave, baby. I'm a ripple compared to you. You're a wave, baby. And you're over my head. You're a wave, baby. I'm a ripple compared to you. You're a wave, baby. And you're overhead. You're a wave, baby. I'm a ripple compared to you. You're a wave, baby.
We've worked on Noyo Harbor now for 3 years. This is the third year. I can see the rocks where I worked the last 3 years in a row. The habitat on the bottom is improved, probably 75% healthier bottom. The perps keep coming in the winter when you get these enormous giant swells. That's going to be hard to stop. But the community, I think, is aware of what we're doing. I think they're supported of it. I think obviously the kelp has come back, just in my eyes, out front here at the harbor. I mean, you can really see it. You drive by the bridge, you look out, you can see that kelp. We did 3 years there now. And now we have all the other divers that come in on that north wall and eradicated almost all of them. We can definitely tell that we're making a difference. Now we just got to scale it up. We need a lot of people to help do this. But it's going to be really, really hard to do it because of the densities that we have up and down our whole coastline.
I've been in contact with all these urchin divers that used to work, every year. I mean, they've worked for 30 years, and since this disaster hit, they haven't been diving and they haven't been working. So talking to all these guys, the idea of a project where they're going to pay you to get back in the water, quality doesn't matter, you don't have to look for a spot, that's hope right there.
My name is Josh Russo. I'm the president of the Watermen's Alliance. I've been diving for about 30 years, and I was diving when the kelp when we had to crawl across it to get in the water, and I was here when it started disappearing, and I was here when the urchin populations exploded, and I've been involved politically since before then. So I was involved when the state and the department had no plans to do anything. The Watermen's Alliance is a group of divers that are engaged politically with the department in regulation development for sustainable harvest. Caspar Cove offers an opportunity for recreational divers to get involved and actively help with kelp restoration. It's the one place where the department is allowing us to actually cull in the wild. Culling has been found to be the most effective, efficient way to affect an urchin barren once it's there. So in order to cull the urchin, what we're doing is we're crushing them on the rock. What we call crushing is just crush it enough so that other people behind you can see that area has been worked. Once you puncture the urchin or crack the shell, it will die. So it's a very selective method of harvest. We can be very selective and only crush the purple urchin. The reds we leave alone. And it was 2018 when I convinced the department to increase the recreational regulations on purple urchin to allow for recreational events like this. In 2020, I got them to allow us to crush here in place. It's been a very good thing to work in one spot because you can really see the effect. So we started working in 2023, and here it is midway through 2025, and there's a lot of kelp here. So that's an amazing amount of progress in a short amount of time with a little bit of effort. Community participation is huge. We get a lot of locals participating, but a lot of people travel from far and wide. And so typically on the last Saturday of each month, April through September, that's the day that I arrange for a compressor to be here to refill tanks for scuba divers. We usually get between 30 to 60 divers. There's no sign up or RSVP or there's no cost to come, and it's legal to do anytime. You don't need to be a diver to participate or to help. You know, we get a lot of people that come just for the potluck on Saturdays or just to hang out on the beach or just because they're interested or curious about information. But you can find a lot of information on our website, CasparCoveProject.org. This project is what spurred the state and the feds to start getting involved with kelp restoration. What it means to me is that a few people that want to see action can make something happen. This is a temporary regulation. It will expire in 2029 and there will not be an extension. This is our opportunity to tell the government that we want them to do something about kelp restoration, and we want them to figure out the science behind it. When do we need to intervene? When do we need to do something? When do we need to leave it alone? What do we need to do when we intervene? How much intervention is necessary and how much should be left to nature? So the questions can be asked, but the answers need to be found.
So in 2020 and 2021, we really took the time to develop science to monitor how effective the hand harvesting was. And it really was. Urchin divers were able to reduce urchin densities to that magic theoretical threshold of like 2 urchin per square meter. We started to see some kelp naturally responding to the cool water, which was awesome. And for me, it was quite telling as, okay, if we're gonna start removing urchin in bulk, then the reef does have the ability to recover. So we leveraged that, had the urchin divers start removing urchin, and that's when we started to see some recovery in the site that had been gnawed down by urchin. So I think of kelp restoration, or the act of recovering kelp, in a few different ways, but in the first bucket, I would say, is predators.
You know, the fuzzy brown elephant in the room of marine science, coastal conservation as it relates to kelp is sea otters. So again, for the movie, it needs to be stated that nobody wanted to talk about sea otters for this film, and I'm happy to hop on, hopefully to bridge some gaps. I'm Patrick Webster. I'm an underwater photographer based out here in Monterey Bay, California, and I do a lot of things marine science communication related, but ultimately I'm a worshiper in the Kelp Cathedral. And when I was 5 years old, I saw the sea otters at the Monterey Bay Aquarium right here, just down the way, and wanted to be a marine biologist and work for the aquarium. And I ultimately wound up at UC Santa Cruz, and I studied marine biology there. All my Saturday nights through college were occupied tending to rescued baby sea otters from all up and down the coast. I worked with the sea otters at the aquarium for 4.5 years. And my senior thesis ended up being under Jim Estes, the late great giant of sea otter, keystone species conservation thinking for sea otters along the Aleutian Islands and their role in the recovery of kelp forests back in the 70s. Sea otters were effectively extinct by the 1800s, and the kelp out here and the dynamics of the kelp forests were unlike they had been for thousands of years, because the Russian fur traders had made their way through this area and had collected almost all of the sea otters, all of the high-class people across the ocean, taking all of these pelts away, and with them, the ecological function of this animal. Then, the coast doesn't die because it's missing a player. You remove that position and the game is fundamentally different. The rules change instantaneously, strategies change, other players rise to prominence. So, that perfect story, great. You have sea otters, they eat the urchins eat the kelp. More otters means more kelp, means less urchins. That's been the story. Ecologically, historically speaking, one can only presume that that's some form of truth, because the otters were there. How many? Not really sure. What was their actual impact? Do they show up after the kelp is established? Do they help the kelp to become established? Not really sure. Here in Monterey, there's a beautiful kelp forest behind me. And right over here is an urchin barren. In here are some sea otters living full time. And they patrol the edges, and the extra sea otters that might be around that are starving and hungry, they'll go and grab those sea urchins that are right there on the edge of the kelp. But we've seen from here that unless you're a starving, really, really emaciated, or extra sea otter without a range, you're probably not going to go after sea urchins first. Otters are going to go for what they're taught, and also a big bang for their buck, calorically speaking. An abalone is way bigger a meal target than a sea urchin in theory. And sea urchins have to have kelp to be able to be nutritious. Sea urchins inside of them have what's called uni. Now, uni is only found with a well-fed sea urchin, not an underfed, starving, zombie-like sea urchin. You have otters that have defended their kelp forest behind me. They've gardened that area. But for all of Monterey, you have urchin barrens within eyesight of sea otters. Why? The otters aren't eating starved sea urchins. There's nothing to them. You can't translocate an adult sea otter. It'll try to swim home. They're extremely home-based. That role that the sea otter can play, if you take one of these young, naive otters with no home range and you put it up on the north coast, they'll have no idea what to do. There won't be much to eat. The urchins that might be around are again empty, so there would be no point of having an otter up there right now. Then you have a North Coast community that is leery of the sea otters, not only because of their potential impact on their livelihood. Their commercial fishery would likely shut down over time with otters in there, with urchins and abalone going down, no longer being commercially viable. The size, like the impact of an otter is unmistakable. It would fundamentally transform that coastline. Each community has its own ocean guardians, clearly. And where I have seen the most impact with kelp forest recovery has been in the areas where the stewardship belongs to the commercial fishermen, to the recreational fishermen, to the conservation-minded kelp recovery under a no sea otter paradigm. They have gotten a lot of work done. Once there's enough kelp maybe, and enough otters maybe to come in naturally, from my conversations it seems like that is something that people would welcome, the idea of a restored kelp forest.
So I think of kelp restoration, or the act of recovering kelp, in a few different ways, but in the first bucket I would say is predators. Like, there's nothing that replaces an apex predator like the sunflower sea star.
My name is Vince Christian, and I am the laboratory manager for Sunflower Star Laboratory. The purpose of our laboratory is to grow sunflower stars from larvae and reintroduce them into the wild. A lot of scientists believe one of the reasons that we are losing a lot of kelp forests is that they've lost a primary predator that's important in the ecosystem, and that predator is the sunflower star. The sunflower star, it's a large star. It's the largest one in the world. It's about 1 meter in diameter, and it doesn't have a lot of animals that eat it. It's basically a top predator. One of the things that it definitely likes are purple urchins. The sunflower star, they disappeared from California in about 2015 because of a disease called sea star wasting syndrome. And since they've been gone, the purple urchin is overpopulated. I found out about the Friday Harbor lab up in Washington who was growing sunflower stars, and but he was the first one to ever do it. And I was wondering, well, is anybody doing anything like that in California? And found out that no one was. Well, then I thought, well, could it be done in California? When I first went on social media to see if other people are interested, I was thinking that they would say, yeah, great idea, Vince, yeah, go for it. But instead they said, yeah, great idea, Vince, how can I help? The community has just been so responsive and so supportive of what we're doing. It's not just me doing this by myself. I don't think I could do this by myself, but with my board and the community involvement and all the support that I'm getting, I think it's going to be successful, and so far it has been. I don't want to claim that bringing back the sunflower stars is going to solve all our problems, but it'll help. I think it could help bring the ecosystems back into balance, and I miss seeing them. I used to see them every single dive, you know, I'd see several of them, but I haven't seen one since 2018. Right now we're in the phase of just trying to grow them to reproductive size. Once we do that, then we will go into a whole nother phase of the project, which will be trying to figure out how to reintroduce them into the wild. And this will all need to be done in conjunction with Fish and Wildlife. We don't know what strategy will be the most effective for them coming back. We'll need to do studies to figure that out, and then once we do that and actually start putting them in the wild, then we'll have to figure out how effective is it. This project will take 10 to 20 years, who knows, maybe even longer. Well, my thought is that where you can, you should try not to get involved any more than you have to, but at this point, I don't see how we can do any more harm. And I think that it could be really helpful to try something, because the loss of the kelp forest is devastating.
In early August of 2025, the University of British Columbia, the Hackeye Institute, and Friday Harbor Labs published a paper identifying the bacteria that causes sea star wasting. This identification is key for ensuring the safe growth and eventual release of sunflower stars in the future.
So then we kind of jump into, okay, if we don't have that organism, what can we as humans do in the meantime to mitigate any more kelp loss from happening? Mind you, we're at about 4% of historical values, and we have yet to see recovery. I think one of the biggest triumphs is in 2019, we had received state funding, so state support of California to come in and start understanding if we are able to harvest urchin, create space on the seafloor, what happens. And what we found is we see some kelp recovery, but we did not see sustained and abundant kelp recovery. So then that kind of peered into our next question. If we're able to create the space, how can we make that vegetative recovery happen? And so that cued in the next set of questions around kelp enhancement.
I've been saying all along too, we should just fill the environment with an overabundance of spores. Let's create spore banks on our own on these barren rocks and just see if they can take or not.
What we really, again, want to understand is what works ecologically. What can we possibly do to protect this ecosystem, keep it from disappearing? But also, as part of that is this very important, very, very important human element of it. What works for place and people that is culturally acceptable, supported, and something that we can feel good putting our backs behind and really getting into.
My name is Rachel Karm, and I'm a research technician. My name is Rachel Karm. I'm a research technician at Sonoma State University in a coastal ecology and conservation lab. From a young age, I always knew I was interested in marine biology. I just loved the ocean, and I loved all the animals in the ocean. And I started volunteering at a local aquarium when I was probably 12 years old. I initially got my scuba certification at the age of 14. I had a slight traumatic experience where I got tangled up in kelp, and I decided that diving probably wasn't for me. And so it's really cool now because my favorite thing in the world is to get tangled up in kelp forests. I have been working in bull kelp restoration for the past 5 years. I started in 2020 as a graduate student at Sonoma State University. And once I finished my degree in 2022, I stuck around as a research technician. So growing kelp in a laboratory is really important in order to manipulate the kelp life history for restoration purposes. So bull kelp is an annual species, which means it undergoes its entire life history in only 1 year. And so in order for us to be able to work with kelp and have it ready for outplanting in the early spring when it's just starting to grow, we need to manipulate its life cycle in a lab setting. And so what that entails is bringing the reproductive parts of the bull kelp, it's called sori, and in the sori houses millions of spores, really similar to mushroom spores. They start out as microscopic kelp individuals and grow into larger blades. So bull kelp needs a lot of water motion in order to continue growing and surviving. And so what we found is to do that, we're able to cut the nematocyst, or the gas-filled bladder that brings bull kelp up to the surface. It makes it more buoyant because it's a photosynthetic organism. It needs to be close to the sun in order to make its own food. And so we're able to cut that nematocyst in half, and the bull kelp will continue growing in this bubble culture, a tumble culture. The techniques that we've used for bull kelp restoration have changed drastically over the past 5 years. When I first started in 2020, it was very novel to use kind of these restoration tools on bull kelp forests in Northern California. But we also tested various techniques like green gravel, which is a technique that works really well in really calm waters, but here on the North Coast it's a little bit more rugged. We've also tested seeded twine, where you seed twine in a laboratory setting and outplant that back into the ocean. And that worked well. It had some localized successes, but we kind of used what we've learned from each of those experiences, and that is what led to the development of the ARCHEV, which is a vertical kelp restoration structure. ARCHEV stands for Array to Recover Kelp Ecosystem Vegetation. And so having this vertical structure that kind of bypasses a lot of the vulnerable early life history stages and also gives them a head start being closer to the surface has really seen major successes. This is our second year using this ARCHEV structure. So we're at Big River in Mendocino, at the Mendocino Headlands, and this is a site I have been lucky enough to dive since 2020. It is one of the sites that we've seen persistent kelp patches post-decline of bull kelp, and unfortunately we actually saw the deforestation of bull kelp here at Big River in about 2022, 2023. There was a massive purple urchin front that came in and just completely decimated what bull kelp remained here at this site. Right now, we're working on a project that is funded by California Sea Grant, and in the future it is part of the Peace Corps restoration funding that is NOAA funded, and we outplanted in 2025 50 ARCHEV units. We are able to go out with Grant Downey, one of the commercial urchin divers, here on his boat. Since we were scaling up to 50 ARCHEVs, we needed about 500 juvenile bull kelp individuals in order to make that happen this year, just at the site Big River. So we had them pre-measured, so we already knew what size the kelps were before we outplanted them, so that way we're able to keep track of it throughout the field season. But I think focusing our efforts on a kelp forest that was recently deforested was really crucial to the success of this project. And so in addition to bull kelp outplanting with the ARCHEV structures, we also work with commercial urchin divers, having them focus on the perimeters of where the kelp still remained has really helped bring back this kelp population. The idea is that you won't need a diver to do this work. You know, the idea is that these commercial urchin divers are able to go and put out these, restoration units in the future and retrieve them, and we don't need divers to, figure out the science of that. That's what we're working on now.
One of the big things about working with conservation that really gets me excited thinking about moving forward towards the future is the combination of techniques. It's not just one or the other. It's putting everything we've learned over these last few years together.
We were able to grow kelp from tiny microscopic seed into reproductive adult, and I have chills even saying it out loud, because you just saw this amazing growth happen that we didn't think was possible.
To me, this has been incredible to actually see these efforts moving forward and being supported by members of the community and especially state and federal agencies. So I would say that there's a lot of hope right now.
What we're trying to do now in this coming year, which I'm really excited for, is basically build on the past 4+ years of learning with each of those individual techniques or pieces of work, put it together. And it's really emphasizing too the human element of it. It's not only the ecological things that we're trying to figure out, it's also how we enable our community to be climate ready. And that's what I'm really excited for. The community of practice has gotten bigger. People are more excited than ever. But yeah, it's a very daunting task ahead of us, and what that looks like is federal support, state, tribal, co-management, all of it. Like that sort of buy-in, that cultural awakening is what is needed to really catalyze that. And I think we need to be open and accept the risk of being thoughtful about what we're doing, but also not being so scared, because the world is getting quite warm.
I think the more people that know about the problem, the better. A lot of people are familiar with things that happen on land because they can see them. But what happens underwater, not so much. People don't know what's going on. You know, there's big changes happening underwater, and the more people that know about the state of our ecosystem and the loss of our kelp forests, and how important it is to people and to the animals that live here.
So when we're thinking about the way that we're trying to elevate kelp, it cannot be understated. Like, they are the reason we're breathing. They are why we have fish. They are why we have birds. Like, they are why, like, our coastline has thrived for so long. We're not going to go in and recover, 350 kilometer of coastline. That's not what we're aiming for. What we're aiming for is established kelp refugia connection, right? These oases, these places where they can serve as that nursery habitat. They can serve as those beautiful hot spots that they are, and produce the seeds that can potentially fill in if and when the ocean is ready to, heal herself. What I want people to know about kelp restoration in California is there are a lot of really smart people that are working very, very hard, like above water, below water, to understand what we can potentially do so that we don't lose this incredible, incredible ecosystem. People are physically putting their bodies in the ocean for sustained periods of time to understand what we can potentially do to not lose any more of this system that not only creates habitat, but creates the oxygen that we breathe. And it's so important in this moment that when we are losing vast swaths of terrestrial forests to fire, and when we pair that with what we have seen in terms of loss underwater, we're in a very not so great situation right now. We as a society need to really elevate and pursue the same level of, I think, understanding, but then also support for those sorts of habitat recovery efforts, because it's not just a feel-good, it's what makes our coastlines climate ready, it's what gives people jobs, it's what gives people food, sovereignty. Like, it's the very impetus of our existence.
In late 2022, commercial sea urchin diver Grant Downey found an adult sunflower sea star while diving off the coast of Mendocino. This news was groundbreaking because it had been nearly 5 years since this species has been seen this far south. A few months later, he found another. Although these two were found far apart, spatially and temporally, there was promise for reproduction.
Abby, what did we find?
In 2024, reports of a juvenile sunflower star in Mendocino County began to circulate. It was found in a tide pool and is being monitored for growth and eating small urchins. The discovery of these individuals has multiple levels of importance. They serve as proof that sunflower stars can still survive in the wild in Northern California. And if this is any indication of a species rebound, it could be instrumental in helping the natural recovery of kelp forests on the North Coast. In July of 2025, news broke of a sunflower star discovery in Sonoma County.
We went out for months trying to find it and hadn't found it. I obviously know what they look like and I've learned about them, and swimming through, I would always do these double takes anytime you think you see something that looks similar to a sunflower star. I was swimming around at the site. It was kind of not a treacherous dive, but you have rough conditions out here. And so I'm swimming and there's some big sets coming through, which means that there's a lot of surge underneath the water. So I'm moving, the algae's moving, we're both moving in different ways. And I push just a tiny piece of algae to the side, and I just instantly, I see the arms of this Pycnopodia. And you know that there's too many to be just an average sea star. And you see this bright, beautiful coloration. And I just, was shocked. This was something that I had hoped to find and had wanted to find, but still couldn't believe that I had found it. And so we were looking around, and I ended up finding a baby, kind of tucked away in a little hole. And I just saw these arms sticking out of the hole. And in that moment, I knew that this was a baby Pycnopodia, a baby sunflower star. And that means that if there's babies, that there's also adults that we're reproducing. And that is really exciting just for the future of kelp forests and kelp forest recovery. And so on that dive, I ended up finding 2 baby Pycnopodia on one rock, and a slightly larger individual about 10 to 15 centimeters. After going back to that site, I ended up finding a few more adults.
About a month after finding the first Sonoma Coast sunflower star, a group of more than 25 scientists and community members collaborated to document as many individual sunflower stars in this location as possible. What they found was more than anyone could have imagined. A staggering 20 sunflower stars were found in this one small area. This is the first known group of successfully spawning adult sunflower stars observed anywhere on the California coast since sea star wasting disease left their California population functionally extinct. With permits from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, small DNA samples were taken from each specimen, including one that was observed to be in the process of wasting. These DNA samples will help determine why and how this wild population has survived against all odds. Although they may just be a few individuals compared to what their prior numbers were, they symbolize a whole lot of hope. There is a thread that ties us together. The same thread that ties together all the world's oceans, land, and sea. No matter how you come to the ocean, by beach, boat, tide pool, or by admiring from afar, kelp is a foundational species for us all. It weaves together habitats and stories, families and friends, time and culture. Our story of kelp connects fishermen, scientists, ocean lovers, and communities because it's the starting point for everything we need and appreciate along the coast. Only a few short years ago, we saw the complete collapse of an ecosystem. When we began this project, we thought we would be documenting the very last forests to cover our coastline. But what we've seen is an aftermath of unwavering human commitment to the ecosystem and to each other. Braving rough seas, cold water, and infinite odds, the community near and far perseveres, pushing us forward into a new chapter. Now more than ever, the world needs hope. Like the holdfast of kelp, we must also be grounded to grow tall and to succeed. What grounds us is this hope for the future. We know now that when given the chance, kelp can regrow. We see that urchins behave differently when they are starving versus when they have ample food. We see sunflower stars which can persist and repopulate despite zoologic disease. And most importantly, we see humans come together with different skills to fight for a common cause and succeed. Recognizing that nothing can replace the sacredness of wild spaces, this next chapter balances on the tip of a kelp blade. If we can continue to care for our coastlines, our communities, and our oceans, just as stewards of the land have done for thousands of years, we may not have to call these our last forests.
But then I come back to like get focused, and Abby's always like, all right, are we ready? Stop laughing. So it's no, you can't.
But it's not necessarily going to, sorry, dog's itching his butt and it's distracting. Ed.
Salty is the sea upon my tongue.
Excuse me. Did you hear that? That was salami. I was like, you know what I mean? Salami Lagunitas.
You're a wave, baby. I'm a ripple.